Sir, you need to leave immediately. This is a private event for law enforcement families only, the security guard declared as he grabbed the arm of the well-dressed black man trying to enter the police academy graduation ceremony. Marcus Thompson, 52, had driven 3 hours to watch his nephew graduate, but the guards assumed he didn't belong at a prestigious law enforcement event. What they didn't know was that Marcus was a decorated 25-year SWAT veteran who had trained half the officers in that building, and his former team was about to arrive and remind everyone what happens when you disrespect a brother in blue. If you believe that every veteran deserves respect, regardless of their appearance, and that true brotherhood means protecting your own, hit that subscribe button right now and tell us where you're watching from, because this story will show you what happens when SWAT loyalty meets injustice. The State Police Academy's graduation ceremony was the pinnacle of achievement for new officers entering law enforcement. The imposing brick building, with its marble columns and brass plaques honoring fallen officers, represented tradition, honor, and the sacred oath to serve and protect. Today, 127 new officers would take that oath in front of their families, friends, and the law enforcement community. Marcus Thompson adjusted his tie as he approached the academy's main entrance, pride swelling in his chest. After 25 years of distinguished service, including 2 decades leading one of the state's most elite SWAT teams, Marcus had retired 6 months ago. But today wasn't about his past service, it was about celebrating the future. His nephew, David Thompson, was graduating 3rd in his academy class, continuing a family tradition of law enforcement service that stretched back 3 generations. Marcus had driven 3 hours from his home upstate, taking time off from his new job as a private security consultant to witness this milestone. He wore his best suit, the same one he'd worn to receive his Medal of Valor 5 years earlier, and carried a small gift for David, his grandfather's vintage police badge from 1952, when black officers were rare and faced challenges that made today's discrimination seem subtle by comparison. As Marcus approached the entrance, he noticed the heightened security typical of law enforcement events. 2 private security guards flanked the main doors, checking invitations and identification. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket for his invitation, a formal card that David had specially requested for his uncle, the family hero who had inspired his career choice. But before Marcus could present his invitation, the first security guard stepped forward with an aggressive posture that immediately triggered Marcus's tactical training instincts. "Hold it right there," Guard Johnson commanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "This is a private event. You need to move along." Marcus paused, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the situation. Guard Johnson was about 35, overweight, with the bearing of someone who had never served in real law enforcement, but enjoyed the authority that came with the uniform and badge. His partner, Guard Wilson, was younger and seemed nervous, clearly following Johnson's lead. "Good morning, officers," Marcus said respectfully, reaching slowly for his invitation. "I'm here for the graduation ceremony. My nephew is graduating today." Johnson's expression hardened with suspicion. "Yeah, right. Let me guess you're somebody uncle who just happened to show up without proper identification." The assumption was clear and insulting. Johnson had looked at Marcus, a well-dressed, articulate black man, and immediately decided he was lying about his connection to the ceremony. Marcus maintained his composure, drawing on decades of de-escalation training. "I have an invitation right here," he said calmly, pulling the formal card from his jacket pocket. But Johnson wasn't interested in seeing the invitation. "Sir, going to need you to leave immediately. This is a private event for law enforcement families only." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here he was, a 25-year law enforcement veteran with more tactical experience than everyone in the building combined, being told he didn't belong at a law enforcement event. "Officer," Marcus said patiently, "if you'll just look at my invitation, you'll see that I'm David Thompson's uncle. He's graduating today, and he specifically requested that I be here." Wilson, the younger guard, shifted uncomfortably. Something about Marcus's bearing and calm authority suggested this wasn't a typical gatecrasher, but Johnson was clearly in charge and had made his decision. "I don't care what you claim," Johnson snapped. "You don't look like law enforcement family to me. Now move along before we have to call for backup." Marcus felt the familiar burn of racial profiling that had followed him throughout his career. Even as a decorated SWAT commander, he had faced assumptions about his capabilities, his authority, and his right to be in certain spaces. But this was different. This was his family's moment, and these guards were trying to steal it, based on nothing more than their prejudices. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice taking on the quiet authority that had commanded respect in tactical situations. "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm asking you to check my invitation and verify my identity before making assumptions." Johnson stepped closer, his chest puffed out in an attempt to intimidate. "Are you threatening me? Because I can have you arrested for trespassing." The escalation was unnecessary and unprofessional, but Marcus recognized the type, someone drunk on minor authority, looking for an excuse to exercise power over others. "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm simply asking for the courtesy of having my credentials verified before being asked to leave." But Johnson had moved beyond reason. "Sir, you need to leave immediately. This is a private event for law enforcement families only," he declared as he grabbed Marcus's arm. The physical contact crossed a line. Marcus's tactical training kicked in automatically, not to fight, but to assess threat levels and maintain situational awareness. Johnson's grip was aggressive but untrained. Wilson was backing away rather than supporting his partner, and several Academy staff members inside the building had noticed the commotion. "Remove your hand," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying decades of command authority. Johnson tightened his grip instead. "You're coming with me. We're calling this in as a trespassing incident." It was at that moment that Marcus heard the sound that would change everything, the low rumble of diesel engines approaching the Academy parking lot. But what these security guards didn't know was that they had just disrespected a legend whose SWAT team was about to arrive. The 3 black tactical vehicles that pulled into the police academy parking lot weren't part of the planned ceremony. They were unmarked Suburbans with tinted windows, the kind used for high-priority operations that required both mobility and protection. As they parked in formation near the main entrance, their occupants emerged with the coordinated precision that marked elite tactical units. Commander Sarah Mitchell was the first to step out, followed by 5 members of the state's premier SWAT team. They weren't in full tactical gear. This was a social visit, but their bearing, their awareness, and their obvious conditioning marked them as operators even in civilian clothes. Mitchell had served under Marcus Thompson for 8 years, before taking over command of the unit when he retired. Like every member of the team, she owed her tactical expertise, her leadership skills, and possibly her life to the training and mentorship Marcus had provided during his tenure as commander. The team was here for David's graduation. Marcus had been their commander, and David was like a nephew to all of them. They had planned to surprise Marcus and celebrate both David's achievement and their former commander's pride in continuing the family tradition. What they saw instead was their beloved former commander being manhandled by security guards who clearly had no idea who they were dealing with. Mitchell's tactical assessment was immediate and thorough. Marcus was maintaining his composure despite obvious provocation. The security guards were escalating unnecessarily, and the situation required immediate but measured intervention. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said quietly to her team members, "tactical approach. No aggression, but make our presence known." The 6 SWAT operators moved with fluid precision across the parking lot toward the main entrance. Their formation was casual, but effective. They approached from multiple angles, maintaining spacing that would allow for immediate response if the situation deteriorated. Marcus saw them coming and felt a mixture of pride and relief. These weren't just former colleagues, they were family, bound by shared experiences in high-stakes operations where trust and loyalty meant the difference between life and death. Johnson, still gripping Marcus's arm, was oblivious to the approaching tactical team. His attention was focused on calling for backup on his radio, trying to make this arrest seem more significant than it actually was. "Control? This is Johnson at the Academy main entrance. I need backup for a trespassing incident. Subject is non-compliant and possibly intoxicated." The lie about intoxication was the final straw for Marcus, but he remained calm, knowing that his team would handle the situation with appropriate precision. Commander Mitchell reached the entrance first, her ID already visible in her hand. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said in the tone that had commanded respect in tactical operations across 3 states. "I'm Commander Mitchell, State SWAT. Is there a problem here?" Johnson looked up from his radio, immediately intimidated by Mitchell's obvious authority, but too committed to his course of action to back down gracefully. "Commander, we have a trespassing situation. This individual claims to be here for the graduation, but he doesn't have proper identification, and he's been uncooperative." Mitchell's eyes moved to Marcus, and her expression shifted from professional inquiry to barely controlled anger. Every member of the SWAT team knew Marcus Thompson's face, his voice, his bearing. He was the commander who had trained them, led them, and earned their absolute loyalty through 2 decades of exceptional service. This individual, Mitchell said slowly, is retired SWAT Commander Marcus Thompson. He trained half the tactical officers in the state, including me. And you're telling me he's trespassing at his nephew's graduation? The color drained from Johnson's face as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Wilson had already stepped back, clearly wanting to distance himself from his partner's poor judgment. Sergeant Rodriguez moved to Marcus's other side, his presence making it clear that Johnson needed to remove his hand immediately. Commander Thompson, Rodriguez said with obvious respect. Good to see you, sir. David's excited that you're here today. The other SWAT team members had formed a loose perimeter around the entrance, their positioning making it clear that they considered Marcus under their protection. Marcus felt the familiar warmth of brotherhood that had sustained him through decades of dangerous operations. These officers would have faced armed criminals to protect him, and they certainly weren't going to allow him to be disrespected by untrained security guards. Gentlemen, Marcus said to Johnson and Wilson, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. These officers can verify my identity and my right to be here. Johnson's grip on Marcus's arm had loosened considerably, but he was still trying to maintain some semblance of authority in a situation that had spiraled completely out of his control. We were just following protocol, Johnson stammered. He didn't show proper identification. Commander Mitchell's expression could have frozen fire. He didn't show identification because you didn't give him a chance to show identification. You made assumptions based on appearance, and those assumptions were wrong. When the tactical vehicles pulled up and Marcus's former team emerged, everyone at the graduation was about to learn about true law enforcement brotherhood. The commotion at the main entrance had not gone unnoticed inside the academy. Several academy instructors, administrators, and family members had gathered near the windows to observe the situation unfolding outside. Captain James Rodriguez, the academy's training commander, emerged from the building as soon as he recognized Commander Mitchell and her team. Captain Rodriguez had worked with Marcus Thompson on several joint operations and held him in the highest regard. Marcus, Captain Rodriguez called out as he approached the group. I didn't know you were coming today. David will be thrilled to see you. The captain's obvious familiarity with Marcus further underscored Johnson's mistake. Here was the academy's training commander greeting the man Johnson had been trying to arrest for trespassing. Captain Rodriguez, Marcus replied warmly, finally able to extricate himself from Johnson's grip as the security guard realized his position was becoming untenable. I wouldn't miss David's graduation for anything. Captain Rodriguez turned to Johnson with barely concealed anger. Guard Johnson, what exactly is going on here? Johnson looked around desperately, realizing that everyone present the SWAT team, the academy commander, and even his own partner was looking at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. Sir, we didn't know. He didn't show identification. He didn't show identification because you didn't ask to see it, Commander Mitchell interjected. You made assumptions based on how he looked, and you acted on those assumptions without following proper procedures. Captain Rodriguez's expression grew darker as he understood what had transpired. Guard Johnson, are you telling me that you attempted to prevent a decorated law enforcement veteran from attending his nephew's graduation without even checking his credentials? The question hung in the air like an accusation, which it essentially was. Johnson had violated the most basic principles of professional security: work, verify before acting, gather information before making decisions, and treat all citizens with respect and dignity. Sir, I was just trying to maintain security. Johnson began weakly. By profiling people based on race? This came from Sergeant Rodriguez, whose own background included extensive training in community relations and bias awareness. Wilson, the younger security guard, finally found his voice. Sir, I had to suggest that we should check his identification, but my partner said it wasn't necessary. The statement threw Johnson completely under the bus, but it also revealed that at least one of the guards had recognized that proper procedures weren't being followed. Marcus, ever the professional, stepped forward to de-escalate the situation. Gentlemen, I appreciate everyone's concern, but the important thing is that we resolve this and move forward. Today is about David and his classmates, not about a misunderstanding at the entrance. His gracious response only served to highlight The contrast between his professionalism and Johnson's behavior. Here was a man who had every right to be angry, who had been physically manhandled and insulted, choosing to focus on what really mattered rather than seeking revenge or humiliation. For those who had wronged him, Commander Mitchell wasn't quite ready to let it go. Marcus, with respect, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling, plain and simple. And it happened to someone who has given more to law enforcement than most officers will give in their entire careers. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. Commander Mitchell is right. This is exactly the kind of incident that damages relationships between law enforcement and the communities we serve. Johnson was now sweating profusely, realizing that his career as a security guard was likely over. Academy officials would certainly review this incident, and his employer would have to answer questions about their hiring and training procedures. Marcus looked around at the gathered group, his former SWAT team, the Academy officials, and the security guards who had misjudged him so badly. You know, Marcus said thoughtfully, when I started in law enforcement 30 years ago, incidents like this were unfortunately common. We've made progress since then, but clearly, we still have work to do. He turned to address Johnson directly. Guard Johnson, I don't know what experiences or training led you to make the assumptions you made about me today, but I hope you'll use this as an opportunity to examine those assumptions and consider how they affect the way you treat other people. The grace and dignity Marcus showed in that moment left everyone speechless. Instead of seeking punishment or revenge, he was offering a lesson in professionalism and humanity. The moment Marcus's SWAT team saw how their commander was being treated, the entire graduation ceremony was about to change forever. Captain Rodriguez made a decision that would transform the day from a routine graduation into something much more meaningful. Marcus, he said, I'd like you to consider participating in today's ceremony. Would you be willing to address the graduating class about leadership, integrity, and what it means to serve with honor? The invitation was unexpected, but Commander Mitchell immediately supported it. Sir, that would be perfect. These new officers need to hear from someone who exemplifies the best of law enforcement. Marcus considered the request carefully. He had come to watch David graduate, not to be the center of attention, but he also recognized the teaching moment that this situation had created. If you think it would be valuable, Captain, I'd be honored. As the group moved toward the academy entrance with Johnson and Wilson conspicuously absent, having been dismissed by Captain Rodriguez, word spread quickly about what had transpired and who Marcus Thompson really was. Inside the academy auditorium, 127 new officers were preparing for the most important moment of their careers. They represented diverse backgrounds, different ages, and various motivations for entering law enforcement. What they all shared was a commitment to serve their communities with integrity and professionalism. David Thompson was among them, resplendent in his dress uniform and filled with pride at finishing third in his class. He had no idea that his uncle had encountered problems at the entrance, or that those problems were about to become a powerful lesson for everyone present. When Captain Rodriguez took the podium to introduce an unexpected speaker, the auditorium fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Rodriguez began. We have a special guest today. Commander Marcus Thompson served with distinction for 25 years, including 20 years leading our state's premier SWAT team. He trained hundreds of officers, led countless high-risk operations, and exemplified the highest standards of law enforcement professionalism. Marcus walked to the podium with the confident bearing that had commanded respect in tactical situations. Across the state, as he looked out at the sea of young faces, he saw his nephew David beaming with pride in the third row. Officers, Marcus began, when I arrived here today to watch my nephew graduate, I encountered a situation that reminded me why the oath you're about to take is so important. He went on to describe the incident at the entrance, but not to embarrass or shame anyone. Instead, he used it as a teaching moment about the dangers of assumption, the importance of treating every citizen with dignity, and the responsibility that comes with wearing a badge. You will encounter people every day who don't look like you, who don't talk like you, who don't live like you, Marcus continued. Your job is not to judge them based on your assumptions. Your job is to serve and protect them with the same professionalism and respect you would show anyone else. The auditorium was completely silent as the new officers absorbed the lesson. Many of them had experienced discrimination in their own lives, and Marcus's words resonated deeply. The badge you're about to receive doesn't just give you authority, Marcus concluded. It gives you responsibility. The responsibility to be better than your biases, stronger than your prejudices, and more professional than your assumptions. When he finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause. The new officers stood and cheered, recognizing that they had just heard from someone who truly understood what it meant to serve with honor. What happened next would become a lesson about respect, brotherhood, and what it really means to serve and protect your own. After the graduation ceremony concluded, an unexpected gathering formed in the academy parking lot. The SWAT team, academy officials, graduating officers, and their families all wanted to meet Marcus Thompson and hear more about his experiences. David Thompson finally had a chance to introduce his uncle to his classmates, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "This is my Uncle Marcus, the man who inspired me to become a police officer." Commander Mitchell stood beside Marcus, still protective, but now relaxed. "Officers, you've just met a legend. Commander Thompson didn't just lead our SWAT team, he created the training programs, the operational procedures, and the culture of excellence that made us the best tactical unit in the state." The stories began to flow as SWAT team members shared memories of operations they had conducted under Marcus's leadership: hostage rescues, high-risk arrests, counter-terrorism operations, situations where Marcus's leadership had meant the difference between success and failure, between life and death. "He taught us that tactical excellence means nothing without moral excellence," Sergeant Rodriguez told the gathered officers. "Anyone can learn to kick down doors and clear rooms, but it takes real leadership to make sure you're kicking down the right doors for the right reasons." Several of the graduating officers approached Marcus individually, asking for advice about their careers, sharing their own experiences with discrimination, and expressing gratitude for the lesson he had taught them. One young black officer, trembling with emotion, thanked Marcus for showing him what was possible. "Sir, there aren't many people who look like us in leadership positions. Seeing you here today, hearing your story, it means everything." Marcus placed a hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Son, you don't need to see someone who looks like you to know that you can achieve excellence, but I'm glad I could be here to remind you that the path is possible." Captain Rodriguez approached Marcus as the gathering began to wind down. "Marcus, I owe you an apology for what happened today, and I want to assure you that we'll be reviewing our security procedures to make sure something like this doesn't happen again." "Captain," Marcus replied, "what happened today was unfortunate, but it also created an opportunity to teach important lessons. Sometimes the best training comes from real situations, not textbook scenarios." As the crowd began to disperse, Commander Mitchell and the SWAT team lingered, reluctant to end their reunion with their former commander. "Sir," Mitchell said, "we've missed having you around. The team isn't the same without your leadership." Marcus smiled at his former protege. "Sarah, you've exceeded every expectation I had when I recommended you for command. The team is in excellent hands, but we could use your wisdom on some of our training programs," she persisted. "Would you consider doing some consulting work with us?" The offer was tempting, and Marcus could see the genuine desire in the faces of his former team members. These relationships, forged in the crucible of tactical operations, represented some of the most meaningful connections of his career. "Let me think about it," Marcus replied, "but today, us David's uncle, here to celebrate his achievement." As the SWAT team prepared to leave, each member made a point of embracing Marcus and expressing their continued respect and affection. These weren't just professional colleagues, they were family, bound by shared experiences and mutual trust that transcended rank, age, and even retirement. The last to leave was David, still wearing his graduation uniform and carrying the vintage police badge that Marcus had given him. "Uncle Marcus," David said, "I heard about what happened at the entrance. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Marcus put his arm around his nephew's shoulders. "David, what happened today reminded me why your decision to become a police officer is so important. We need good people in law enforcement, people who will treat everyone with dignity and respect." "I learned that from watching you," David replied. "You've always been my hero, but seeing how you handled that situation today with grace and professionalism, even when you were being treated unfairly, that's the kind of officer I want to be." As they walked toward Marcus's car, David asked, "Do you think things will ever change? Will we ever get to a point where people aren't judged by how they look?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Son, change happens one person at a time, one interaction at a time. Today, Those security guards learned something about making assumptions. Your classmates learned something about treating people with dignity. And maybe some of the family members who witness this will think differently about race and respect. He paused to look back at the academy building, where he had just delivered an unplanned but powerful lesson to the next generation of law enforcement officers. We can't change everyone's heart overnight, Marcus continued, but we can model the behavior we want to see. We can treat every person with respect and dignity, regardless of how they look or where they come from. And maybe, gradually, that example will influence others to do the same. The lesson that began with injustice had transformed into something much more powerful, a demonstration of leadership, grace under pressure, and the true meaning of law enforcement brotherhood. And in the parking lot of the police academy, surrounded by the next generation of officers, Marcus Thompson had proven once again why he was considered a legend in law enforcement. The security guards who had tried to remove him were nowhere to be seen, but the impact of their mistake and Marcus's response to it would influence the careers and attitudes of 127 new police officers for decades to come. Where are you watching this video from? Don't forget to leave a comment with your city. Remember, every comment is a voice, and every voice is a change. What about you? Have you ever encountered such an event or situation? Write a comment. We want to hear your story.